The common sentiment surrounding MyAnimeList ratings is that they're just about completely useless, because everything over a 7.5 is amazing, while everything under a 6.5 is unwatchable. So I found myself extremely curious on just how Mal arrives at these numbers, so I made a spreadsheet. And inputted Mal's rating formula so I can run some simulations of my own. Do my controversial hot takes drag down the score of otherwise loved shows? Does the lowest anime ever made deserve a 1.9? Let's figure out once and for all if we should put any stock into that beautiful gray number. Yeah, hello and welcome back to Kinda Neat. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. There is nothing wrong with liking any anime, regardless of its score or what other people think of it. Your opinion is the only one that matters. Unless, of course, we're talking about SAO, in which case you're wrong. For me, half the fun of watching anime is figuring out where it fits into my rating system, and I just use that little gray number as a tool to decide what to watch next. To begin our journey through a certain scientific spreadsheet, I want to figure out which loved anime that I gave the lowest score. Not surprisingly, my taste actually aligned pretty closely with the general consensus, because we're all sheep and nobody's unique, regardless of what your third grade teacher told you. But there were a few outliers, so I'm about to expose myself for science. No, Susan, not like that. I'm about to expose my most controversial opinions for the whole world to see, so please don't hate me for giving The Promised Neverland a 4. But even if I were a troll and gave it a 1 out of 10, would that have any effect on the overall score? To answer that question, first we need to understand how Mal scores work. To generate that beautiful gray number, the robots divide the total number of users who've... So I just realized how boring this probably sounds to most people, but the TLDR is that the final score is not only affected by the average user rating, but also how many ratings the show has, and how it compares to the site-wide average, which is currently a 6.73. But hang on, shouldn't the average across all anime be closer to a 5? Not necessarily. Mal uses a score of 1 to 10, not 0 to 10, which means an average score would actually be a 5.5. But psychologically, we all assume 5 is the halfway point, so that partially explains why the entire site seems to be skewed too high. Technically, we have 4 negative choices, 1 neutral choice, and 5 positive options. The other reason the scores tend to skew so high is because Mal does not take ratings into account unless the user has completed at least 20% of the show. So if it's a 1 out of 10 bad, it shouldn't take you 3 episodes to figure that out. So the vast majority of negative reviews don't even count. And rightfully so. You can't rate an entire show based on just watching the OP. Unless of course it's Tower of God. Basically, the further away from the site-wide average you get, the harder it is to continue moving in that direction, like an elastic band getting pulled tighter and tighter. But back to the matter at hand. Do trolls rating good shows 1 and bad shows 10 make any difference to the final score? Using the lowest rated anime ever made, I've accurately plotted out how many of each ratings it received, including all the clowns who gave it a perfect score. And as you can see, the formula is just about spot on within a rounding error. If I stretch my imagination, I could see someone with really trash taste giving it a 5. So what happens if we remove all of the positive reviews? Not surprisingly, the score only dropped by 0.5, which I think is safe to say won't change anyone's mind on whether they watch it or not. So unless there's a ridiculous number of fake users boosting it up, the final score really shouldn't be swayed too much. And vice versa for review bombing good shows. Speaking of which, currently the highest rated anime of all time is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but it only has a measly 9.2. Pathetic. So hypothetically, would it be possible to make an anime so well written, with such beautiful art and enticing characters that it captures the heart of every anime fan in the world and earns itself a perfect 10? Absolutely not. It would take 65,300 perfect scores for a show to achieve a 10 out of 10. Any less or any reviews other than a 10, and it drops to a 9.99. Although sort of counterintuitive, this actually makes a lot of sense. It stops people from listing their anime on the site, and then using fake accounts to make it temporarily the highest rated show of all time. With 100 perfect scores, your anime will still only receive an 8.35. Slightly above average, and obviously the same is true for the inverse. The lowest you could intentionally drop a show to using 100 fake accounts is a 3.85. So, I don't know about you, but to me, the way Mal formulates their scores actually seems like a pretty accurate representation of the way the community feels about the anime as a whole. And you should feel totally confident in using the score to gauge how likely you are to enjoy a show. But there are a few biases you should keep in mind. Unless someone really f***ed up, sequels will just about always have a higher score than the original, because the only people who watch season 2 are those who enjoyed the first season. So it acts as a shield, protecting it from reviewers with different tastes. Second, new shows tend to be rated higher than old ones. This is simply due to the demographic watching seasonal anime and the sheer lack of total reviews. As you can see, seasonal anime scores tend to slowly decrease with time, and that's why they just about all have a 7.5. I'm sorry, but no! Bad. Stop. Lastly, and this is where things really fall apart, let's say 100 people rated a show. If half of them give it a 10 out of 10, and the other half give it a 1 out of 10, Mao will assign this show a score of 6.1, which is the exact same score it would be given if all 100 people gave it a perfectly average 5.5. In the first scenario, there's a 50% chance that you would absolutely love the anime, and also a 50% chance that you'd hate it. But in the second scenario, assuming your tastes align with the masses, which they do, there's a 100% chance that you'll find the anime to be so-so. So, I'd much rather risk it for the biscuit and watch the more controversial option. That's why it can also be a useful tool to navigate over to the stats page and sneak a peek at the actual distribution of ratings. The complaint that every single anime on the site is rated way too high, somewhere between a 6 and a 9, is actually just confirmation bias at work. If you look at the distribution across the entire site, there is an equal number of 4s as there are 8s, and far fewer 9s than there are 2s and 3s. You just happen to only be checking scores for shows that you've been recommended in some form, and past that only shows that pique your interest, narrowing your search to only higher rated shows. So yeah, just about everything watchable on MyAnimeList does lie between a 5 and a 9, but that's exactly how it should be, because nobody has any business unironically watching through a 2 out of 10 like Striking Daughter in its entirety. Papa. Unless of course you're making a YouTube video about it, like I've done right here on this channel. And also make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of my future spreadsheets, I guess. So I found myself extremely curious